Bran and Khadgar, undaunted by the horrors, fought with the resolve of those who had faced the abyss before. Bran's gun roared, its shots tearing through the Faceless One's unnatural flesh, while Khadgar's arcane mastery wove spells of fire and light to banish the shadows. Yet the true battle was within, as they steeled their minds against the whispering voice. Khadgar, versed in the lore of the old gods, likely recognized the peril of Serenite's influence, recalling its role in corrupting the Titan-forged keepers and the Grizzlemoth furbolgs of Vordrassil. Bran, ever the historian, might have drawn upon memories of Yogg-Saron's defeat, knowing that the old god's prison had never been infallible, its black blood tainted Northrend's very crust. Their mission to meet Magni pressed them onward, where the world soul's fate hung in the balance. Magni's transformation into Azeroth's speaker had made him a conduit for the planet's will, and his presence in Ulduar suggested a connection to the Titan's legacy, and perhaps to the old god's threat. The Serenite Vapors and Faceless Ones were not mere obstacles, but a warning that Yogg-Saron's influence endured, possibly stirred by the Legion's invasion or the awakening of Azeroth's world soul. The unknown voice's cryptic taunts hinted at deeper truths. Was Yogg-Saron rallying its strength back to break free, or was it manipulating events to align with the schemes of its fellow old gods, N'Zoth and C'Thun? The Burning Legion's assault had weakened Azeroth's defenses, creating fertile ground for the old gods to sow chaos, and Ulduar's desecration was a grim omen of what might come. Though the immediate threat was overcome, the encounter left an indelible mark. The Serenite's vapors dissipated, and the Faceless Ones fell, but whispering voices lingered in the recesses of Bran and Khadgar's minds, a reminder of Yogg-Saron's unyielding presence. Ulduar, once a bastion of Titan order, stood as a haunted relic, its halls echoing with the old god's refrain, "Hope is an illusion." The incident underscored a chilling truth. Yogg-Saron's defeat years prior had not eradicated its essence, nor had it severed its ties to Azeroth's fate. As the Legion's shadows loomed and the world soul stirred, the old god's whispers hinted at a greater role in the cosmic struggle, its Serenite veins a pulsing reminder that the god of death awaited its moment to rise once more. Battle for Azeroth. In the wake of the cataclysmic defeat of N'Zoth, the last of the known old gods to plague Azeroth, a profound declaration resounded through the archives of the world's champions. Magni Bronzebeard, once a king of Ironforge and now the crystalline speaker of Azeroth's world soul, stood amongst the aftermath of the harrowing campaign in Neolotha, the Black City. With the voice imbued with the weight of the planet's will, he proclaimed that Azeroth had been unshackled from the malign grasp of the old gods. This bold assertion carried the hope that the ancient malevolent entities, C'Thun, Yogg-Saron, and N'Zoth, and their fallen kin, had been vanquished, their millennia-long campaign to corrupt and dominate the world brought to an end. For Yogg-Saron, the beast with 1,000 maws, imprisoned beneath the Titan-forged halls of Ulduar, Magni's words suggested a future where its dreaded whispers would remain silenced, its return to power an unlikely shadow in Azeroth's dawn and age. The defeat of N'Zoth marked a pivotal moment in Azeroth's history, for it was the first time the old god's collective influence appeared to have been wholly eradicated. C'Thun had fallen in the depths of Ahn'Qiraj, its Silithid hordes broken by the might of mortal heroes. Yogg-Saron, the god of death, had been subdued within Ulduar's labyrinth prison, its Serenite-soaked scheming thwarted by adventurers who braved its sanity-shattering visions. N'Zoth, the corruptor, had woven its most insidious plot yet, reaching a mortal plane through Ny'alotha and threatening to drown Azeroth in a tide of void. Yet, with the aid of the Heart of Azeroth, Titan-forged artifact channeling the world soul's power, and the resolve of champions guided by Magni, N'Zoth was cast down, its nightmarish city crumbling into the abyss. Magni's proclamation was not mere optimism, but a reflection of the world soul's awakening, a sign that Azeroth, stirred by the sacrifices of its defenders, had rejected the old god's corruption at its core. For Yogg-Saron, Magni's words carried particular weight. The old god's legacy was one of subtle, pervasive chaos. The curse of flesh had turned Titan-forged into mortals, the emerald nightmare that tainted the dream through Vordrassil's roots, and the Serenite veins that poisoned Northrend's crust. Its influence had touched the mightiest, corrupting keepers like Loken, driving furbolgs to madness, and even whispering in the shadows of the Lich King's reign. Yet, its defeat in Ulduar had been a significant blow, its prison reinforced by the Titan's mechanisms and the vigilance of the Keepers restored to their purpose. The Serenite Vapors and the Faceless Ones that later plagued Ulduar during the Burning Legion's third invasion, encountered by Bran Bronzebeard and Khadgar, were but echoes of Yogg-Saron's power, stirrings of a weakened entity unable to fully break its chains. Magni's declaration suggested that these remnants, too, had been quelled, their connection to the old god's greater network severed with N'Zoth's fall. The basis for Magni's confidence lay in his unique bond with Azeroth's world soul. Transformed into a crystalline emissary, Magni could sense the planet's state, its rhythms and wounds. The old gods, creation of the Void Lords, had burrowed into Azeroth to corrupt its nascent Titan spirit, twisting its potential into a harbinger of darkness. Their defeats, first Cthulhu, then Yogg-Saron, and finally N'Zoth, weakened the Void's grip, allowing Azeroth's world soul to assert its will. The heart of Azeroth, wielded against N'Zoth, had channeled the planet's power to purge the old god's corruption, a feat that Magni interpreted as a cleansing of the deeper taint afflicting the world. Yogg-Saron, bound within Ulduar and lacking the active influence of its kin, was presumably left dormant, its ability to manipulate or escape diminished by the collapse of the old god's collective schemes. Yet, the lore of Azeroth is steeped in cycles of resurgence and hidden truths, casting a shadow of doubt over Magni's optimistic decree. The old gods are entities of cosmic malevolence, their essence entwined with the planet's very fabric. The Titans themselves, in their primordial war against the old gods, deemed their complete destruction impossible without annihilating Azeroth itself, opting instead for imprisonment. Yogg-Saron's prison in Ulduar, though formidable, had proven permeable, its Serenite blood seeping into the world, its whispers bending minds, and its faceless minions stirring even after its defeat. Visions it conjured in Ulduar, hinting at its role in the Great Sundering, the fall of Stormwind, and the Lich King's reign, suggested a reach that transcended physical confidence, perhaps even time itself. Magni's claim, while rooted in the world soul's triumph, did not account for the possibility that Yogg-Saron's essence lingered, biding its time in the shadows of Northrend or within the minds it had touched. Moreover, the defeat of N'Zoth raised questions about the old god's true nature. Were they truly individual entities, or facets of a greater void-driven will? The Emerald Nightmare, born of Yogg-Saron's corruption of Vordrassil, but later nurtured by N'Zoth's influence, demonstrated a synergy among the old gods, their schemes interlocking across realms and eras. Magni's declaration assumed that N'Zoth's fall severed this network, but the Void's patience is infinite, and Yogg-Saron's silence could be a strategic retreat rather than obliteration. The Serenite Mines, the cursed stump of Vordrassil, and the lingering madness of the Grizzlemoth Furbolgs stood as testaments to Yogg-Saron's enduring mark, untouched by N'Zoth's defeat. Even the Keepers of Ulduar, restored though they were, could not guarantee the old god's eternal containment, for Loken's betrayal had shown how even the mightiest could fall. Magni's proclamation, then, was both a beacon of hope and a potential oversight. The heroes of Azeroth, it offered respite, a moment to believe the old god's reign had ended, yet Yogg-Saron's whispers would no longer haunt the world's dreams. The world's soul's awakening, bolstered by the heart of Azeroth, suggested a new era where Azeroth could heal from the Void's wounds. Yet the lore of the old gods is one of deception and resilience. Yogg-Saron, the lucid dream and a fiend of 1,000 faces, had proclaimed, "Hope is an illusion," in its final moments, a taunt that lingered in the hearts of those who knew its power. While Magni's words heralded a future free of Yogg-Saron's tyranny, the shadows of Ulduar whispered a caution. The old god's defeat is never certain, and in the deep places of the world, the god of death might yet stir, awaiting a crack in Azeroth's newfound resolve to weave its chaos anew. Exploring Azeroth. In the aftermath of the harrowing war against the Jailer, a conflict that saw the very foundations of the Shadowlands shaken and Azeroth's heroes tested by mortal limits, Muradin Bronzebeard, the stalwart dwarven warrior and brother to Magni, turned his gaze to the lingering shadows of older threats. His report, delivered with the grim certainty of one who had faced the terrors of Northrend firsthand, cast a somber light on the state of Yogg-Saron, the old god known as the Beast with 1,000 Maws. Though defeated years prior within the Titan-forged halls of Ulduar, Yogg-Saron's malevolent presence had not been wholly eradicated. Its influence, like a festering wound, persisted in the places where its power once held sway, most noticeably Whisper Gulch, and its insidious whispers still echo through the icy winds of Northrend and the shadowed corridors of Ulduar. Yet, for all its lingering dread, Yogg-Saron remained physically bound within its ancient prison, its ability to act directly curtailed, its influence seemingly contained, though never to be underestimated. The war against the Jailer, the cosmic struggle to thwart the Banished One's designs on remaking reality, had drawn Azeroth's champions into realms beyond the mortal plane, revealing the interconnectedness of life, death, and the forces that sought to unravel both. With the Jailer's defeat, the world's defenders returned to a scarred Azeroth, wary of threats that might exploit the chaos left in the wake of such upheaval. Muradin's report, likely informed by his own expeditions or intelligence from the Explorers League, underscored a chilling truth. Even in defeat, an old god's essence was not so easily purged. Yogg-Saron, though cast down by heroes during the campaign against the Lich King, had woven its corruption too deeply into Azeroth's fabric to be wholly exorcised. Its prison in Ulduar, crafted by the Titans to bind its unimaginable power, held firm, but the old god's reach extended beyond mere physicality, manifesting as a psychic residue that haunted the land and its people. Whisper Gulch, a desolate ravine in the Howland Fjord, stood as a stark testament to Yogg-Saron's enduring influence. This forsaken place, named for the eerie murmurs that plagued those who ventured too close, was steeped in the old god's legacy. The Gulch's proximity to Saronite deposits, crystalline remnants of Yogg-Saron's black blood, amplified its malevolence, for Saronite was no mere mineral, but a conduit for the old god's will. Miners who dared to work the Gulch's veins, whether Vrykul, dwarf, or other, succumbed to madness, their minds unraveled by whispers of despair, betrayal, and forbidden truce. These were not random afflictions, but the deliberate echoes of Yogg-Saron's voice, the same that had once driven the Titan-forged keeper Lokran to betray his kin and corrupted the Grizzlemar Furbolgs at Vordrassil's stump. Muradin's report likely noted the Gulch's continued danger, a place where the old god's influence remained potent, turning ally against ally and sowing chaos among those who lingered too long. Across Northrend, the whispers persisted, carried on the frigid winds that swept from the storm peaks to the grisly hills. These were not the commanding decrees of an unbound Yogg-Saron, but faint, insidious murmurs, fragments of its former power that lingered in the Saronite veins threading the continent's crust. To the Vrykul clans, whose ancestors had fallen under the old god's sway, these whispers stoked paranoia and fanaticism, rekindling ancient loyalties to the god of death. To adventurers and settlers, they were a haunting reminder of Northrend's cursed history, a land where even the Lich King had treaded cautiously, wary of Saronite's power to undermine his dominion. Muradin, a veteran of Northrend's perils, would have recognized these signs from his time aiding the alliance against Arthas, recalling how Saronite had tainted the Scourge's fortress and armor, its whispers a rival to the Lich King's own control. Within Ulduar itself, the heart of Yogg-Saron's imprisonment, the old god's presence was most palpable. The Titan complex, a marvel of order and craftsmanship, bore the scars of its corruption. Saronite veins pulsing in its depths, faceless ones that had once stirred during the Burning Legion's invasion, and chambers where the air itself seemed to hum with dread. Muradin's report likely drew on accounts from the Keepers, Thorim, Freya, Odir, and Mimiron, who had been restored to their duties after Yogg-Saron's defeat. These Titan-forged guardians, once ensnared by the old god's scheming, now stood vigilant, ensuring the integrity of Yogg-Saron's prison. Yet even they could not silence the whispers that seeped through Ulduar's halls, faint echoes of the visions Yogg-Saron had once conjured, the forging of the Dragon's Soul, the assassination of King Lane, and the Lich King's torment of Bolvar Fordragon. These murmurs were not mere memories, but active remnants of the old god's psyche, probing for weakness in the minds of any of those who entered, from scholars like Bran Bronzebeard to unwary explorers. The containment of Yogg-Saron's influence, as Muradin noted, was a fragile victory. The old god remained physically imprisoned, its writhing form of mouths and tentacles bound by the Titan's arcane mechanisms, unable to manifest as it had once done during Ulduar's raid. The defeat of N'Zoth, declared by Magni Bronzebeard as the liberation of Azeroth from the old god's grasp, had severed the network that once amplified Yogg-Saron's power, leaving it isolated and weakened. The World Soul's awakening, bolstered by the heart of Azeroth, had further fortified Azeroth against the Void's corruption, ensuring that Yogg-Saron could not easily rally its strength. Yet the persistence of its whispers, in Whisper Gulch across Northrend, and within Ulduar, hinted at a deeper truth. The old gods were not mere beings, but cosmic forces, their essence entwined with Azeroth's very core. The Titans had deemed their destruction impossible without annihilating the planet, and Yogg-Saron's lingering influence was proof of its resilience, a shadow that could neither be fully banished nor ignored. Muradin's report, steeped in the pragmaticism of a warrior who knew the cost of hubris, served as both a reassurance and a warning. The containment of Yogg-Saron's influence suggested that Azeroth's defenders had time to focus on new threats. The aftermath of the Shadowlands upheaval, the stirring of the Dragon Isles, or the plotting of forces yet unknown. Yet the whispers in Whisper Gulch and Ulduar's halls were a reminder of the old god's patience, its ability to bide its time until a moment of weakness arose. The Saronite veins, the cursed legacy of Vordrassil, and the madness that had touched mortals and keepers alike, stood as monuments to Yogg-Saron's enduring will. Even the prophecy it had uttered, "No king rules forever, only death is eternal," echoed in the fall of Arthas and in the rise of Bolvar, hinting at a forethought that transcended its prison. In the lore of Azeroth, where hope and despair are ever entwined, Yogg-Saron's containment was a hard-won respite, not a final triumph. Muradin's words urge vigilance, for the old god's whispers were not merely echoes, but seeds, awaiting for fertile ground to take root. In the deep places of Northrend, where Saronite glowed and shadows stirred, the god of death endured, its lucid dream unbroken, its fiend of 1,000 faces watching from the abyss, ready to whisper once more, should Azeroth's guardians falter. Interest in trivia. Throughout the frozen expanses of Northrend, veins of a sinister ore known as Saronite gleamed with an unnatural, sickly green hue, a malevolent presence woven into the very crust of the land. Dubbed the black blood of Yogg-Saron by the wise and wary Tuskarr, this substance is no mere mineral, but a tangible remnant of the old god Yogg-Saron's physical essence, a byproduct of its dread manifestation within Azeroth's depths. The Tuskarr, steeped in the lore of their icy homeland, warn all who heed their counsel to shun Saronite, for its touch is a poison to the mind. Prolonged exposure drives mortals to violent insanity, their thoughts unraveled by whispers of despair, rage, and forbidden truths. Echoes of the same voice that once corrupted the Titan-forged keeper Lokran and drove the Grizzlemaw furbolgs to madness. Saronite's corrupting influence is so potent that even the stoutest hearts falter, their sanity eroded as if by the old god's own will. The Scourge, under the iron grip of the Lich King, exploits Saronite with relentless fervor, mining its deposits across Northrend to fuel their war machine. This dread ore is forged into weapons that hum with malevolent energy, armor that seems to pulse with a life of its own, and even the fuel that powers their necromantic engines. Most chillingly, Saronite forms the blackened bones of their grandest structures, including the towering spires of Ice-Crown Citadel, the Lich King's impregnable seat of power. The Citadel's walls, imbued with the black blood of Yogg-Saron, stand as a testament to the Scourge's hubris, for Saronite's presence is a double-edged sword. While it grants unnatural resilience, it also carries the old god's whispers, a latent threat that even the Lich King's indomitable will cannot fully suppress. Yet, a curious revelation emerged from Alliance quests in Northrend's shadowed reaches. The undead of the Scourge, bound to the Lich King's command, were observed uttering the name Yogg-Saron with visceral hatred and contempt, their hollow voices dripping with loathing. This animosity hinted at a deeper conflict, perhaps a recognition of Yogg-Saron's rival influence, a force capable of challenging the Lich King's dominion over his minions. Saronite's whispers, woven in the very materials of the Scourge's war effort, may have stirred dissent within the undead ranks, their minds touched by the old god's insidious will. This hostility suggested that the Lich King, for all his power, was wary of Yogg-Saron's reach, knowing that the black blood coursing through his citadel could undermine his absolute control. In Northrend's frozen heart, Saronite remained a cursed legacy, its glow a reminder that Yogg-Saron's influence endured, even in the shadow of the Scourge's might. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Content comes out weekly with lore videos on Sunday, ambiance videos on Monday, and retail or classic paladin content on Thursday.